Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gala webinar series. My name is Isabella Massardo, and I'm the content strategist at Gala. Gala is a non-profit trade association connecting and supporting the global language industry. Today, we are going to have a panel discussion hosted by Javier Correro, Research and Development Director at Beluga Linguistics. The discussion is centered around the present and future of natural language generation in the localization industry. Now, before we get to the discussion, some quick house rules. I know you're probably all pros at this by now, but still. You are muted and will remain so for the duration of the webinar. If you experience technical difficulties, you can let me know by using your chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. In that case, you can use the number listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in using your phone. We are making a recording of the webinar, and you will be able to find it later on the Gala's website. If you have any questions for our panel, please type them in using the chat feature, and we will try to get as many questions as we have time for at the end of the discussion. Now, let me introduce the panel. As I said, the moderator is Javier Correro, Research and Development Director at Beluga Linguistics. And the panelists in alphabetical order are Adam Bittlingmayer, CEO and co-founder at ModelFront, software engineer and specialist in translation risk prediction. Sultan Ghaznawi, founder and president of YYZ Translations. Prior to that, he worked for 10 years at the Canadian telecom TELUS, and he is an avid student of artificial intelligence. And Maxime Khalilov, currently head of research and development at Glovo and co-founder of Write with AI. Prior to that, he was director of applied artificial intelligence at Unbabel. All right, Javier, the floor is yours. I'll be back later with questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night to everyone. My name is Javier Correro, and our goal today is that whatever your role is in the industry, that you will come away with something, something that maybe you can apply to your business, or at least you get some insight or learn about NLG. Thank you for being here with us today. I want to say hello to our panelists, Maxime, Sultan, Adam. Thank you very much for joining our panel. It's a pleasure to have you here today with us. Thank you very much, guys. And we can start, if you want, we can start from the base. We are here to talk about NLG, but what's NLG, and as an industry, why should we pay attention to it? Sultan, can you tell us?
Good morning, everyone from Toronto. I hope wherever you are, the weather is nice. It's very cold in here, but thank you for that question, Javi. I'm very happy to be part of this panel. I think artificial intelligence, which is a very broad term encompassing many subfields or technologies, brings us lots of opportunities to innovate in the localization and translation space. As you know, this industry has had its challenges with technology, and now it is an exciting time to embrace the possibilities. So deep learning, the technology behind so many AI-driven solutions, gives us the tools to create and manipulate content. Natural language processing, or NLP, for example, gives us the algorithms and models to create machine translation systems that we already use and we are familiar with. So then there is natural language understanding, or NLU, which lets us understand what is being said and helps us transcribe speech for that matter. Natural language generation, or NLG, is a relatively new and less understood concept that will let us generate content in the languages of our choice. Right now, it's really good in developing content from a few keywords in English, for example. As an industry, I think we need to pay attention to NLG because it may redirect some of the translation work from that pipeline in certain fields to this solution. I'm talking about NLG. It presents a completely new line of service, and I believe it is very excited to be in this industry and in this field at this time. And I'm sure my colleagues will agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a kind of a new a new kid in the block, right? I mean, some years ago we were talking about machine translation, which can change the way how translation is done, and we see it's happening. I think that the expectations from NLG, especially if we're talking about multilingual NLG, are pretty similar, right? So imagine that you have, I don't know, a brief, for example, in English, and then the machine can start generating not just translations, but content in multiple languages at the same time. I think this is the expectations, but a good question, like where are we right now, and how, when we will be at the point when we can say that machine can replace humans.
I kind of see us in this sort of productionization phase. So there were a lot of things going on, let's say from 2013 with the word2vec, and then until, let's say, but it wasn't until 2016, 2017 that NMT really came out, right? So, and then now anybody can train an NMT model. So we're in this, I think why we're excited is that all of these cool toys came, but nobody's put them together yet. Or people, some people have, some people haven't, right?
Okay, very good. And then how can we apply NLG in our industry? What solutions are ready? Because we are seeing a lot of news, and we heard about some articles, but what is really available right now in the market? Adam, for example.
Yeah, so I would distinguish between what you can build, and my feeling really is like if Google can build it, you can build it. I mean, they have NMT, many LSPs also train their own NMT, right? You can do a Lilt or an Unbabel, right? Because they've done it, and you can train quality estimation yourself. There are open source frameworks for it and so on. You can buy, in terms of what you can buy, it's more limited, right? Not everything that somebody has somewhere is available to be bought. I think modern MT is something very interesting. So you can give it context, you can give it a TM and it instantly updates. This you can buy already for 2 years. Amazon just came out with this, but they essentially just copied modern MT. And it syncs, across translators and so on. Then on the no-code side, I think it's a lot more limited. Like if you don't have engineers and you're not willing to do any API integration, I mean, there are things out there. There are people who use ModelFront like manually, kind of for every project. I don't see how that's sustainable. You have something like copy.ai, which for monolingual content. Really cool thing, just came out. You can do ad copy, marketing copy with that. You give it a prompt. It's using GPT-3 under the hood, right? So that's obviously on top of that. So GPT-3 comes out. If you can't code, you obviously can't use that. They get early access, build a product on top of it. Now you can do that, but is there like an API? Can you get 1 billion of those from them? No, you can't, right? It's more like an app, right? So that's kind of how I see us right now, that if you're willing to put things together, you can do some really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you talk about GPT-3. When do you think we will have available in the market GPT-3 to test and to work with?
These guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're sort of early access right now. So if you sign up, they approve.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it can take months, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not that easy. But yes. Okay.
Yeah, maybe if I can add to it a little bit. Yeah. So actually, I tried to dig into this field in the past months a little bit deeper than let's say the beginning of the year, and I realized that actually GPT-3 is not the only model which is available for customization and generation. So tthe, for example, from Google is an alternative. It's smaller, but at the same time, it's more controllable. I mean, we have around like dozens of experience trying to compare the two models, and tthe seems to be like easier to control, although it's less creative than GPT-3, let's say, right? It's subjective opinion, but that's based on it's based on this particular content type that we're experimenting with. And yeah, in addition to copy.ai, there are also like other solutions on the market, for example, Flowrite or Headline. I really love those very early stage companies. They kind of, the Flowrite, for example, I think it's trying to solve like a pretty general problem of copywriting, right? So it's not specializing in a particular domain. And Headline, it's another marketing tool, also trying to automate automate generation based on templates, right? Also, we are doing like, we're trying to get into the advertisement area with AI, like offering and trying to automate the generation of Google Ads descriptions, which is kind of much narrower task, and that's why we're hopeful that we can solve it well. Yeah, but overall, I mean, this year it's really like it's a very early stage for this market, but we already see that the technologies provided by OpenAI, Google, the big enablers for let's say new commercial solutions, right? So who knows what will happen next? But I think that in 2021 there will be like, I don't know, dozens of new companies trying to solve this problem.
I agree with both Adam and Max. I think that there is a lot of opportunities, and we are just at the starting phases. The only problem that I have right now that I foresee is that it's a very narrow field. So you have to have a very well-defined use case in order to use the current NLG capabilities. I think there are a multitude of ways to create revenue-generating applications of NLG in our industry. There are not many solutions available in the market because these are early days, but as Adam and Max said, GPT-3, for example, allows us to generate content mostly in English using the natural language generation capabilities. I think this is where we need some creative thinking in terms of utilizing natural language generation to address how our industry is facing challenges with content generation and distribution. So those applications have to be defined. Transcreation in other languages is just one application in our industry. I think we can address that with this technology, but I think that there are applications that we haven't thought of. I think there might be industry specific solutions that we could offer. For example, we could generate content on a daily basis to address the changing dynamics of COVID and healthcare, for example, or provide news and journalistic analysis on current affairs, depending on what the demographic or the dynamics are actually. How we monetize that is a big question, at least in my mind, but I'm sure that it will be addressed over time. As you can see, our industry is expanding and adding new skill sets and possibilities, and I'm very excited about that.
Very nice, very good. And I would like to talk a little bit more about the technology. What is under the hood? Because all us we can see how we insert a text and the system generates a song or a longer text or analyze this text or many things. But what is behind? What technology is behind? Maxime, can you help with us with that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, let me start with a kind of a little bit of introduction to this topic. So I think that writing, especially creative writing, is one of the most advanced and, well, to a large extent, also mysterious activities of a human brain, right? So the mechanics of this process is, I wouldn't say that it's actually completely understood. It's not, there was several attempts to study it. However, we still don't know exactly what is creativity, how creativity is enabled, what are the main factors actually influencing creativity. So that's why asking a machine to do it, to basically do the creative writing, right? It's kind of even the next level. So you are trying to model what you don't completely understand. However, if we get into mechanics of how exactly the AI is actually taking the text generation task, right? I'm oversimplifying quite a lot, but in principle, what it does, it generates like text word by word, right? So it's looking at the previous context. It's looking at something which is called prompt, and prompt is basically the brief, right? So if you consider copywriter, usually when he or she is asked to write like a copy, there is some explanation of what exactly this copy should be about. So this is a prompt in terms of AI. And then the machine starts generating texts word by word, and one of the options that of the words that it can generate is a stop word, right? And stop word means the end of the sentence. So, and that's in principle how this process goes, right? And the quality of NLG, it comes primarily, it comes to two things. So availability of resources and availability of data. So, in principle, like these big models that we just mentioned, GPT-3, T5, and others, they're all trained on like billions and billions of lines of text, right? Primarily in English, because of course, like majority of the content available in the internet is in English. And yeah, that's actually why we don't see like thousands of models like GPT-3, right? Because you have to have like a very significant amount of computational resources to do that, and data, of course, too. So yeah, and in principle, that's how it works, right? The tricky bit is these days is quite different than what, I mean, we had, for example, 5-7 years ago with an application to other NLP tasks, when we had to train models for every task. So now these models are kind of customizable, or they're customizable in a slightly different way than before. Now you need to inform the model what you want to get from it, right? Because everything is there already. So it's trained on so much data that you, in principle, the question is how to squeeze what you want out of this model. That's why the quality of this prompt is becoming critical for basically your output, for the quality of your output. Plus, of course, there's another consideration which many people like overlook is the cost of infrastructure, right? So, or cost of access to the API. So GPT-3 is definitely not free, right? I mean, and it's not free for a good reason, because infrastructure supporting training and supporting inference, it's pretty expensive. So, or the alternative is that you can basically get smaller version of the model and try to put it on your own servers. But then you have to somehow like support with servers, right? To buy them from a cloud, or maybe set up your own data center. So yeah, commercial considerations are definitely also very important here.
It's not free, for sure. Okay, Sultan, you talked before about the different products available in the market, but in your opinion, what opportunities and risks those NLG present in our industry, to our industry?
Well, Javi, I think in terms of opportunities, it opens up new areas of business. For translators, for example, which are basically content producers in a way, besides performing human translation and MT post-editing, for those of us, of course, interested, NLG also presents the opportunity to moderate and review content. So I would say that, you know, if you will, it is the same idea that English language editors would apply to content generated in English today. You will probably find that such things as fact checking would become a new skill, and we already see that in the political news sphere. If we are looking at risks and challenges, I normally try not to dwell too much on negatives, but you may see that the volumes of content may change to some degree in terms of what needs to be translated or processed through the translation machine that we have as an industry, but that will easily be compensated with high volumes that will be processed through human translation and machine translation. In terms of risks, that this technology may succeed, the biggest one is content itself. We have tons of content in English, as Max said earlier, but some languages, especially the low resource ones where we have fewer speakers, or the language has simply been neglected due to social political issues, we don't have much content in that. And we know that machine learning, deep learning, or AI in general thrives on content, on data. And the more data we feed it, the better it gets. It's basically a student. If you have a good teacher who teaches you a lot of material in a good way, then the student turns out to be, you know, someone who's good at that, or will develop good knowledge in that field or subject. But with other languages that we are dealing with, European languages, I don't think there will be a problem. Even with languages of some Asian countries like Mandarin, we may not have an issue. But if we're talking about languages of Africa and so forth, we may not have as much content, and developing content or creating that data is not cheap, and it's not easy. So that is a risk factor in terms of getting NLG off the ground for our industry to perform well beyond the English boundaries, if you know what I mean.
Okay, maybe Adam can give something more, his idea about it.
Yeah, I'll kind of, I know this is almost a business question. I don't, but I'll somewhat spin it back to the technical side, because there's the value, but then there's also what's actually feasible. Like, this stuff can't do everything. Absolutely. We can talk a lot about the limitations, right? So I think that the main advantages of automation in general is scale. It doesn't matter if it's speed or if it's number of languages or some other dimension, like this dynamic customization that Maxime was talking about. So I don't see that many cases where humans are being replaced, because I mean, maybe humans already would have been replaced, or they get replaced by outsourcing, let's say, more than by automation, but rather like the things that we just couldn't do before with humans, right? So if you think about how the tech industry approaches translation more, it's like, okay, all of eBay is translated, but like, there was never an option to translate all of eBay by humans. 50 million items, 100 million items, 100 languages. I mean, how's that going to work? So then you get to this question of like, what can it do? I mean, so there are a lot of things with scale, but then like, what can it do? And I think Maxime explained well, it's sort of like your phone's auto-suggest, right? Like, hi, how are, like, what could be the next word, right? But just more, bigger and more. And then you get to this Paul Graham quote, which is that the less interesting your message, the more autocorrect helps you. Or the other way. The more interesting your message, the less autocorrect helps you. So if you're saying something really, truly unique that's never been said before, never been thought before, never been written anywhere before, then it's not going to fill in the blank like that, right? So what kind of content would that be? I think other people in this, not just on the panel, but in the audience, would be better to say that than I am. But it's the things that are really boring.
So Adam, let me ask you this: isn't this counterintuitive that we are running into this creativity conundrum where AI is good at doing things that we are doing repetitively, that it expects or it anticipates what we're doing? So isn't NLG to some degree supposed to address that creativity gap?
You mean with sort of like prompts to get past writer's block and like just throw something out there? And yeah, I mean, that's also a possibility, and there it's almost like good if it's bad and creative, but I'm not sure if that exists. Like if I think about copy AI, I'm not much into the monolingual stuff, but right, I think it's more suggesting like pretty logical stuff. But I'm open. I mean, I'm very curious to hear about more creative things, song lyrics or something.
Yeah, and if we talk a little bit about like translation industry, right? I think multilingual language generation models, that's the technology which potentially, if it works, can disrupt the industry, right, in a good way. So simply because, of course, I mean, majority of models, I mean, pretty much all the models which we have been talking about, like GPT-3 and GPT-5, they're monolingual. They work just for English, right? However, there are versions of some of these models which are multilingual. They're not working yet properly. I mean, I know it because we tested it. Yeah, but I think it's just a question of maybe time and data availability, as Sultan said. So before we will be talking about like, okay, so let's generate a copy in 20 languages at the same time, right? And that can change the industry pretty much, right?
I agree with this a lot. I mean, we lean heavily on multilingual. I don't think we would exist if multilingual models didn't exist, but we're not doing multilingual generation, right? We're just doing multilingual quality control on the generation. So it comes a little bit earlier and faster. And I had this thing, and I always had this thing, you know, even back when I was just writing a software app and you see the localization strings and you're like, okay, why did the one translator, why into Spanish they changed inches to centimeters and into Italian they didn't, right? And then in German they did, and in Dutch they didn't, and you can't tell me there's any linguistic reason for that, right? Or, you know, whether, I don't know, the name of your brand should be translated or not, and all of this stuff. And like, that should just be more consistent, right? And so this thing, I think we're gonna crack, like it's not gonna be like this anymore. But I admit that that is a boring job and more of like it's something I do, and it's something where I will be replaced because it's not very creative, right?
Yes, true. That's good. Okay, then for the companies who are thinking of investing on NLG services right now, how do you monetize NLG? What is the value actually that can give you the NLG? For example, Maxime.
Yeah, well, I think there are two perspectives: productivity perspective and product development perspective. So the productivity one, I think it's pretty much obvious, right? I mean that you are paying copywriters, so now you probably pay them less because they're still needed, but they're needed for like a process which is analogous to post-editing in machine translation, right? So this is one. But second one, which I think is much more interesting.
Do you mean pay them less per word or per hour? So I mean.
Oh, well, I don't know yet. I mean, probably per hour, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's an interesting topic for the follow-up discussion. So, and another one, I believe that a more interesting perspective is how you can optimize and boost the end-to-end process. So imagine that right now, for example, you write a copy, and this copy always has a purpose, right? So there is audience for this copy, and you, with this copy, you try to move a needle of a certain metric. It can be conversion rate, right? For example. So NLG can give you an opportunity to generate with various versions of the same copy with a much lower cost. So for this certain audience, for example, before you had a copywriter who you trusted that he or she knows this audience, so you trust the opinion of this person when it comes to the quality and the content of the copy. However, now you don't need to trust, you can experiment, right? And it can give you like lots of opportunities in terms of optimization, your content optimization, right? And if we like look at a kind of a more narrow domain, for example, Google Ads, right? So advertisement campaigns. So here, I mean, it's becoming even more because in principle, after deciding on which keywords you want to write your Google Ads for, then the vision is that actually you don't need like any human intervention at all because the machine can generate multiple copies, test them. It's called A/B testing, right? So pick the versions which work best and basically keep on writing similar advertisements in the future, right? If you take this vision as granted, then in principle the advertisement industry can be automated in the future. Of course, I know it sounds a little bit utopian because Google also smart, right? So it will start penalizing similar copies, but at least that's how we can change the industry in the long run. Guys, I'm curious what you think about it.
I think in one word, you just said feedback loop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
think that it will be defined like, you know, we need to define this as a service definition for most other AI solutions in the language industry. But I can imagine the service offering will be somewhat analogous to machine translation, as you mentioned. If you have your own algorithm and data model, you might be able to sell that as a service with proprietary wrappings and so on. But that would be unlikely given the amount of data and integration that you need from multiple solutions. I see more of a metered approach using APIs delivered solutions where a language company can partner with their clients and offer them machine-based transcreation service, if you will, using NLG, where the provider is someone like Amazon or Google, for example, through APIs. Just to answer your question about value, I think it is a mix of speed, originality, or creativity, if you will, and relevance that our clients want and are willing to invest in such services. Of course, it will be critical to have that human in the loop phase where a person from the intended market, an expert, vets the content before it goes to the client. But there's definitely value in it, and I think it remains to be defined.
Okay, very good. Okay, then Adam, seems clear that NLG will be part of our future as an industry. What do our translation of translators and LSPs need to do to take advantage of NLG?
So I think it doesn't matter, right? We can consider machine translation as a form of NLG or NLU plus NLG or monolingual content creation. But the main thing, the main mistake that we see is not saving your data. So you have these current processes that you're doing now. So for machine translation, we have this, right? You get your input string, we have that, and then we know what the final translation is. Though a lot of them throw away the machine translation, so they don't have all the data for the post editing, right? But now for, let's say, monolingual content creation, you end up with your final article, let's say. Did you keep the description that you were given from which you generated that? All of this, because I mean, how would you train a model then in the future? Or even if there's a service where you can buy something, I mean, that's, you know, where we're coming into this. It's like, okay, we're here to help you, but you don't have anything saved, right? We can't do anything. So saving your data, including metadata, like which translator it was, what time it was, just save it, right? Disk is free. And then kind of knowing these patterns, like when is ML a good fit? What is it good at? What are these? There's kind of these playbooks, right, that you see again and again applied to different things. And then knowing de-risking strategies. So how to avoid egg on your face, how to avoid models spitting out things that come and look bad for your business or cause bad things to happen. Like, and there are strategies, right? If going back to like those finance articles are mostly written with templates, that's fair. No deep learning or anything, just templates, to, you know, having a confidence score. All of that stuff makes it possible to, and then the framing too, right? So I mean, if it's a LinkedIn suggestion, how you should answer, it doesn't really matter that much if it's wrong, because the person doesn't have to click it, right? Same with the YouTube recommendation. So those, I think, are the things to think about. And then when you know those things, then when you see it, you know right away, and you can pull the trigger.
Well, I think, Adam, to your point, data ownership is also key here, because most of our clients, they own the data, and we can't simply say we can keep that data and train new algorithms. There are different types of data, and today data is basically the new gold. So if the data is publicly available, or the client actually transfers the rights to a company like mine, then in that case it makes sense to train the engine or the algorithm. But that being said, with the active learning, I think we have an opportunity for machine learning algorithms that actually are focused on NLP to learn over time without actually retaining that data. And I think there's also an opportunity to use transfer learning, so we can move that learned algorithm from one project to another, or maybe multiple projects. But that being said, you know, certain new skills will need to be learned, I think, in our industry, and we need to prepare for that. How we take advantage of it, linguists will need to familiarize. I'm talking about my perspective, not on a technical basis, but linguists need to familiarize themselves with what this technology is and what the output means to them. If a piece of content is produced by NLG, at least I need to know where it came from, and then I can make certain judgments on the quality of the text, the facts used in it, references, and so on. Basically, I think explainability becomes an issue as well, and there's a lot of efforts right now to explain how the machine came to a certain conclusion to develop a type of output, because without it being able to explain why it uses certain fact in developing this content, I think we will not trust the output, and that's a major issue in my opinion. Remember, you're an editor here, and it's not bilingual editing of some text translated by someone else. It could be if someone shows you the source, but most likely you will only be shown the output in another language. Language companies like mine interested in diving into this line of business have to retool and not just understand what it is, but also train their workforce, onboard the necessary technology through their own development, which I promise you it will be very costly, or through renting other people's technology using APIs or other means. We just talked about GPT-3 or Google's products. But in my opinion, I think the most important change we have to make is in our mindset. We have to accept that technology is here, and we have to adapt and take advantage of the opportunities it offers. Resisting this change is not going to help us, whether we like it or not. The world will move on, and unlike in the past, when we used to call the shots as an industry, I'm talking about the language industry, the changes from outside the industry, primarily in Silicon Valley or Beijing, will dictate how technology will process language, and we have to unfortunately accept that if we're not part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that from the technical perspective, the process will look different, because there are three elements that can be influenced to control the quality of the generated text, right? So is model parameters. So similar to machine translation, you also usually have to play a little bit with parameters before putting system in production. So second is the prompt, the piece of text that basically gives instructions to the model, like what to generate. And I think that's where most of the effort, linguistic effort, will be focused on, and probably it will be like the secret sauce of the good generated copies. Plus, I think on top of that, at least in a midterm, there will be like a level which you control the quality of the output, right? So maybe there's some stop words which you don't want to see in the output, and well, similar to actually post-processing that we're doing in machine translation. So, and maybe some risk assessment as well. All right, so, and these three parameters, these three elements of the NLG will probably dictate the quality, and will be differentiator in terms of service offering between different NLG systems.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can start to talk about the future. Where do you expect the NLG to be in 5 years? For example, Adam.
So multilingual, I think we all agree. A little more context awareness. I mean, I personally find it bizarre. You go to Google, Microsoft, and you type in, let's say, Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, and it translates, you know, Mountain View as Vista de la Montaña. Okay. But this thing knows where you had lunch, you know, what your phone number is. I mean, it knows where you are, right? And this has to change. So, you know, awareness, whether it's the previous segment or the picture of the product, we get a lot of stuff where like the picture is the only way you could know is this inches or centimeters or whatever, right? So then, yeah, this kind of a score, and I think this is actually very tightly tied to the score, is like the idea of options. So and what does this mean for like a translator is there's going to be a lot more tap and less typing, which is really what you want, right? Like, is it Apple the company or Apple the product? There's only two options, right? The Apple or Manzana. Okay, just let me tap that one, and I'm going to be 10x faster, right? And it's fun. You can lean back. You know, it's a different experience. And then that all leads to hybrid generation. So, and I think everything. I don't like to speculate about the future. All of these things are happening right now. Post-editing is a form of hybrid generation. It's just the ability to dial it, to lean more aggressively on the machine side, and so on. So everything will be more hybrid going forward, and more of the machine.
Sultan, what's your prediction?
I forgot my crystal ball, so I have to use annual prediction. Anyway, NLG has been around in one form or another for several years. GPT-3 model that OpenAI released a few months ago has shown very impressive results with regards to NLG. For example, it can write an entire article on a subject that you feed it, and the output is almost identical to human writing. It's not perfect, but it's good. The issue is that while the performance of NLP is impressive, it is only in English because of the data. I mean, it makes sense. The whole internet was in English for a very long time. In other languages, it lags behind, and that is going to be a challenge for some time until such models mature. As you are aware, an AI algorithm is as good as the training data, or its training data, that is. It appears that training algorithms is a lot easier in English because, as I said, there's vast amounts of data out there. As Adam said, awareness and contextualization is going to be very important. Courtesy of one of my friends, Christian Casamlon from Spark NLP, I understand that NLP combined with knowledge graphs will make a lot of buzz in the near future, and I think NLG will benefit from that. So to just give you a little bit of idea, knowledge graphs offer a technology which is event representative learning, and it aims to embed news and other types of information into continuous space vectors for capturing syntactic and semantic information from text corpuses. In other languages, either the data is not there or there is no structure, or simply the data is of bad quality. So hopefully that will change over time. And to answer your question about the next 5 years, it is a tough one because I see leaps and bounds of progress in English or even in common European languages as well as Mandarin, but with other languages it may still be lagging behind. That's why my company has decided to offer quality data in low resource languages, whether you require text or speech. And as I said, the quality of the training data will determine the success of your NLP or NLG project.
Maxime?
Yeah, if I can add to it. So I think actually for NLG, we will see many more companies appearing in the following 5 years. And I think there will be specialization, right? Probably more than in case of machine translation. So there will be companies specialized in specific content types, maybe industries and stuff like that. So definitely the interaction between a machine and a human will change, as Adam said, right? And I totally agree with it. I believe that it will be with NLG, since you have like a pretty much endless list of copies that the model can generate for you. The task for a human will be just to select full copies or elements of the copy which are good, right? And basically submit it to the system, right? Which of course means that there will be feedback loop, and even this process can be automated, right? So, and one more thing which I believe will become like a consequence of automation is that creative copies, like really high quality copies, will become even more valuable than now, right? Because there will be many more copies available. I mean, let's say repetitive or let's say simple copies to generate available in the world. That's why the value of creative copies will even increase. So that's my prediction.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it will be a good time to start with the Q&A part. Okay. I think Isabella can help us to open the option to leave your questions.
So I'm gonna read some questions for you, and you guys can just decide for yourself whether you want to reply. You might have touched already on some points, but I think it might be interesting to repeat somehow because it's such an interesting and complex topic. So the first question is from Nicholas, and he writes, having tried GPT-3, it's been focused mostly on English and has a strong bias, for example, gender, race, and to write complex and reliable content, it seems still quite far. Also, given that machine translation is still far from human quality level, do you think that a combination of NLG in English and MT in other language could be the future of NLG? Or again, looking in the future, are there other promising solutions in terms of multilingual NLG support? Who wants to reply?
Let me maybe start. Sorry.
Well, go ahead, Max. I'll talk about it from a business point of view, but you can talk about technical. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, probably. I think that actually GPT-3, first of all, GPT-3 is much more than just tool to generate text, right? I mean, it can generate code. It can do much more than that, right? So that's why we cannot really look at it only from that perspective. In terms of biases, yes, definitely, it's a big problem. And I know that actually there are many eyes looking at this problem. And I think that it will be, if not solved, but mitigated in the near future. Right. So and yeah, I mean, GPT-3 is probably something that we have now, but I'm pretty sure that like in 2021 there will be new models released by these giant companies. There was an announcement, I think, a week or two ago that Google also like trained another beast, like 1 trillion model, 1 trillion parameter model. So yeah, so I think it will change. It will change actually faster than we think. I believe that actually if we have this discussion 1 year from now, our arguments and our observations will be totally different.
Well, to add to what Maxime just said, I think the only constant in our universe is change, and we have to accept it. And I think GPT-3 is basically a start of something very big, and Google has already been on it. I'm pretty sure Amazon and everybody else is working on solving this problem. So to address your question about whether NLG plus MT is a good solution, it entirely depends on your business case. You might be able to generate content in English using AI and then use AI to translate it, or you could just simply write your content by a human in English language, a human author, and then have that content regenerated in other languages without translating it, so that basically NLG can create the content, and then it uses something like knowledge graphs to learn about the socioeconomic, political, cultural types of facts of that specific market, and then adapt that content to sound entirely native and targeted for that specific market. So I see a solution like that. So, but again, it entirely depends on your business case and how you put this together. As Lego pieces, you can form any shape or format or structure of a business case for that.
Okay, Adam or Javier, would you like to add something?
No, well,
I guess
Adam.
I'd say I'm on the negative. I am a little bit. I agree with Sultan. We shouldn't be negative, but I am, in the risk business, so I'll talk about two risks here. Firstly, I don't think that generating content by machine generating content in English and then machine translating it, I don't think that's a great plan. I think it's better to kind of generate more like what Sultan is saying, where you train on the data in that language and sort of monolingually generate in that language, maybe with hints, with a knowledge graph or whatever, right? The risk I see here is what happened to us in machine translation, which is when we would do error analyses, right? Even let's say 2009, 2010, right? A long time ago. You go, and back then you could actually see which sentence it was trained on that was causing that translation, which is something we've actually lost with NMT. And what was inevitably the problem was that it had crawled the web and found a parallel sentence, but that parallel sentence was empty. And now we're talking about, generating content, monolingual content with machines, and then Google and Amazon scraping the whole web and training huge models on, who knows, maybe generated content, right? And so, I mean, if you want to talk about bias, imagine, and these early models are always the worst. They have some ticks, stuff like that, and that thing will just keep going back in over and over again. So I see a lot of problems here, actually.
Thank you. Another question from Valeria. One of the biggest limitations she notices, whether it's with text or voice, is the inability of the models to deal with foreign words. So if there are English words in French, the model cannot understand them. Do you foresee any progress with this issue? Who wants to go first? Maxime?
Well, I think it's a very different problem than NLG itself, right? Yeah, I mean, definitely in the past years there have been significant progress in the field of named entity recognition, right? And one of the subtasks for named entity recognition can be possibly, okay, so how can we know which words don't need to be translated, right? I mean, from French into English. Yeah. So I think it will become better, but I don't see it as a solved problem, like by any means yet, to be honest. If we talk about automation, right? I mean, of course, with human resources, you can isolate those words, put them in terminology, or do whatever you want, right? Yeah, but from the automation perspective, I mean, you cannot really consider it as a solved problem, I would say. Adam, maybe you have a better perspective.
No, I agree. This is one of our biggest challenges, especially when there's not much context or it's pretty arbitrary. And I would even go so far as to say that in the other languages, it's easier because most of the brand names and everything are sort of in English these days. So like in Russian or something, you can clearly see what's a software product or an app or whatever. And in English, it's the most difficult.
Okay.
And I agree. I think it's a common problem. I think the solution is not ready. From my understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, the current vector representation of text or even word embeddings, it does not allow us to mine for foreign words or words that are actually contextually doesn't belong to this text. And the technology is not there. I think it will take some time to develop that, but for now, I think we have to rely on human annotation if we wanted to for things like that in order to identify what needs to be isolated.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, Javier, if you want to add something, or shall we go to the next question?
No, I think the same as they said. Yeah.
Okay, we still have a couple of minutes, so I'm going to take one more question, and I think it's a question that's been on almost everybody's mind. How long would it take for GPT-3 to write a speech like the one from Amanda Gorman for Biden's inauguration? That's a good one. For those who don't know, Amanda Gorman was the young poet who recited the poem for Biden's inauguration. I think it was yesterday. So could GPT-3 write something like that?
No.
No.
I think we will need a different model for that. Well, first of all, because GPT-3 is a general purpose model. Second, because it's still, I believe, not capable of doing that. I mean, you Sultan referred to an article, I think it was in Financial Times or on one of the big newspapers, which was claimed to be written by GPT-3, right? But if you read like a small font there, so you will see that actually they cherry picked the good sentences generated by the model, right? And they run this model several times. So it was not like, like you press the button, you get like a high quality article. So you need to do some post work for that. So, and if you would use this strategy, yes, possibly you can use GPT-3 and write something like that already. But if we're talking about like a little bit more serious automation, then we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
well,
thank you.
Let me add. I think Maxime is right. I mean, the models are good. They've developed a long way. They've come a long way. So here's the dilemma. There's a lack. It's still a machine. It lacks creativity. It takes a lot of moving pieces to put that together, and we still don't know how human creativity is developed. I mean, it's good. I've played around with these things. I've created things like, for example, a script that uses AI to send "I love you" messages to my wife every often, once in a while, but that's as much creative as can get, not beyond that. I don't know when it will be able to write a speech like that, and I don't think it will be anytime soon.
Okay, which brings us to the very last question, and it's about the role of translators, basically. Would linguists then will take on an editor role similar to the MT process, but then add the cultural element to the output of NLG? Is that what you foresee? Not just post-editing, but something more? A yes or no?
I can take that if you want.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Max. Yeah, I think, in my opinion, our industry is going to grow. It will not just simply be about converting words from one language to another. I think very soon we will be responsible for handling words that are created by machines. And as you said, as MT post editors, we will soon become fact checkers, and we will be responsible for making sure that the machines deliver things that are true, that are as accurate, that's applicable to a specific target market. So we have to develop that expertise. How it's going to look like, I can't really predict that right now, but I foresee that some of our translators will move into that space to fill that gap, because we will need a large workforce if NLG gets traction, which I think it will. We will need a large workforce of people to verify the output, whether it's okay to be used or not okay to be used, and whether you call it post editors or whatever the name for that would be. I think that's where some of our translators will really nicely fit in.
Okay, thank you. Do you want guys add anything else, or Adam or Javier or Maxime? Okay, then we're going to slowly close the webinar. First of all, let me thank you, Javier, for organizing.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Adam and Sultan and Maxime, for sharing your knowledge with us. And a big thank you to all the participants. We would appreciate it if you could just take a minute to give us your feedback on today's sessions using the post-event survey. It is quite short, I promise, but your feedback will help us to refine the webinar program. One small point of Gala news, there are other webinars scheduled for the next few weeks. Please check out the events section of our website for more info. And for now, I wish you all a good day or a good night, depending on where you are. And I look forward to seeing you all at another Gala event. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Isabella.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.